Few people in this industry have seen it all and called it right as often as Matteo Rizzi, a true FinTech OG, a connector of dots and people, and someone I'm lucky to call a close friend. Matteo doesn't just observe the future, he shapes it. Buckle up, because this conversation is bound to be as bold, insightful, and no-nonsense as he is. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Tales from the FinTech Crypt. I have a very special guest today. I know I say that for most of my guests, but this time I really mean it. Matteo and I have been friends for quite some years now, and I think if you haven't met him before, you're going to fall in love with him today. So thank you for coming over, Matteo, and talking to us about FinTech.
Hey, I know you're saying this to everybody, but I'm really happy to take this invitation, Duena. It's a pleasure.
Genuinely, I'm excited about chatting. We have seen beginnings and ends of all kinds of things in the industry, and a bunch of the moments that we've learned together have been seminal for kind of the evolution of technology and the financial industries. But when we met, you had been already on this journey for a while. So you wanna take us through like a short short enough, if you can, because it's a complicated long road. Where has Matteo been in the journey with FinTech?
You know, Duena, I wish I could say I worked the 25 years for a bank and here I am, but probably nothing is less so. Let's say the only true thing is the number. So I think it's been exactly 25 years. And this year, and I know that because I started working for Swift in the year 2000. It's 2025, so it's been 25 years. There is no, it's
Denying
difficult
it, yes.
to exactly difficult to deny. So it's not like it's a quarter of a century in financial services. I can say that, and it's also easy because half of them were at Swift and half of them were outside. So that's also, there is that. And by now, many people know that the most interesting part at Swift, and you interviewed Notarius as well, which I very proudly, hired into this mess, back in the days. I'm also one of the OGs of InnoTribe, which is whatever Notarius said it is. So I don't think it's worth to repeat it. But let's say that. I had Revolut beta on my phone, for example, coaching Nick on how to not mess up, in the InnoTribe challenge. And actually, Lida, was one of the coaches back then. We still remember, having a lot of fun. And if you Google TransferWise and InnoTribe, you see me with. Still with no hair, but with a suit and a tie, which was pretty much for already the last time. For me, basically emceeing the startup challenge where
Right.
TransferWise won. That was, considered in the beginning, and there were just two of them, right? So
let's give people a bit of context as well. I know they've probably, hopefully, listened to the Nectarios episode, and I know that people know in the industry exactly what it is. But for anyone who's new, and there are loads of people that are very young in the area, InnoTribe was practically, to my mind, the very first cradle of fostering innovation in financial technology, and it was surprisingly organized by a company that you wouldn't have thought of as the first innovator necessarily. And I don't know how much people are familiar with it, but if you aren't, go check what Swift does, because they are practically the rails of financial technology. And kind of that realization of how do we go from the rails to the front end seems to have been what, at least from the outside, what was pushing InnoTribe. And seminal for the industry. Most of the big names have been through the hands of either Matteo Nectarios or some of the other coaches. And this is the story that you're hearing now.
At the same time, if someone listens to a podcast that has FinTech on it and doesn't know what Swift is or does, then she's very confused.
Right, there's a lot of work to be done if that's where we are. Yes.
Exactly. But so that was basically the what occupied the last 5 years of my Swift time. And then, the other 13 years is where, life got complicated a bit because I started wearing several hats. Maybe for the first couple of years after I went out from Swift, only the investor one, because we manage $100 million fund together with Mircea Mihaescu, who is not unfamiliar to you either.
One of three or
And
four Romanian names in the industry. So yes,
exactly,
very proud of him.
exactly. So Mircea and I basically set up this $100 million fund, starting investing, in actually our fund back then, it was called SBT Venture Capital. Literally was the first declared official $100 million fintech fund backed by a bank. And we did a few bad investments, but also a couple of good ones. And probably eToro is
the most famous.
Exactly the most famous one. And then a couple of years later, we sort of made a deal with our main funder. Sort of gave back the baby to the originator of the fund, and then sort of another way more hectic life started because a lot of banks starting to ask for help because the experience of building a corporate venture capital was very precious. So I helped a couple of banks setting up their own venture arm. But then very quickly got involved with Africa, which is, still today, I don't know if you can see that there is a map behind me, which is surprisingly in my reading room, but is actually my working document because the continent is so big that it's difficult if for me at least, if you don't have a visual. So Omidyar Network hired me as a venture partner. Our first investment was surprisingly Flutterwave, the seed of Flutterwave. So Flutterwave is the first Africa fintech unicorn, and we are very proud to be the one who gave them literally the first, together with 6 or 7 other funds, we gave them the first $2 million. And then I started falling in love with the continent. So I always kept, for the past 10 years, an investor hat focused on emerging markets, and particularly in Africa. This as an institutional investor or a venture partner or a VC. As an individual, I might have invested here and there in a couple of other ventures, not only African, but let's say that the investor hat has been a constant. But also there is the entrepreneur one, because in 2015, we created the FinTech stage. It changed name 3 times in 10 years, but originally it was FinTech stage. And you were there amongst one of the first speakers that I called, because I decided that on my 45th birthday, that's why I remember the dates exactly, the 31st of March, 2015, we did the first FinTech stage in Milan.
Yeah.
And so that was the first of, I want to say 20 or 25 events around the world. Back then, doing events was still a thing. I mean, it's still today, but then you can make money with it. Today is a bit more complicated unless you are, Money 2020 or a very big, very, very big brand. And so FinTech Stage was born, and my partner was Lazzaro Campos, so the former CEO of Swift.
Yes.
Which is also like a pretty interesting,
very interesting character. I should probably see if he'll come talk to us a little bit.
Totally. It would be fun. And so Lazzaro and I started FinTech Stage. He was the guy still in a suit and a tie. In the meantime, I morphed into the black T-shirt and black only, then
trendy Matteo,
only type of guy. Exactly. Not trendy, but simple, rather minimalist. I prefer. and which is very useful when you travel a lot, because with a single trolley you get from -10 to +34 in a single trip. And so that was the second sort of hat, the entrepreneurship hat, that of course evolved into doing consulting. And then because we were investing in Africa, all of a sudden we got a couple of grants from the Gates Foundation, from a media network to start developing ecosystem in Africa. And then very quickly, the third sort of leg was born, which is the impact, if you want to, side of my work. So in 2019, we created Time Pledge as a platform to coach African entrepreneurs on soft skills for free. And, the typical napkin startup in a bar in Zanzibar, actually, true story. We were all there, bunch of great speakers, sipping cocktails in Zanzibar. And I say, wait a second, what are you doing here, sipping cocktails, when we could actually go outside and spend time with the entrepreneurs? We are here, our trip is paid anyway by this conference. So we should actually pledge some time. So the timepledge.org was available. I registered back then. And we ended up spending time with 2,500 entrepreneurs in 10 different countries. And that was before COVID hit. Then it became, of course, virtual. And today, and I want to say this because it's actually, we are announcing the first pilot very soon. The Time Pledge has evolved into a platform to upskill African 1% of best coders. So
Wow.
we are now we in partnership with universities. There are 11 universities that signed up an MOU with us. We are actually taking the best data scientists, the best full stack developers, and the best cybersecurity experts, put them in a program of 6 months, so that they can reach the same level of curriculum of any European university. And then we put them in touch with either successful startups that did a good round, so they're of course in need for talent, or we have a bunch of, we call them Time Pledge talent partners, like banks, central banks, insurance groups, like technology partners. Because what is missing today is one, the right level of preparation, but also the visibility, for on the talent side of the real good, cool opportunities of the country. So it is, of course, free for the students, and is not a startup purposely. But I didn't want an investor to tell me that I couldn't go to Sierra Leone and I should go to Nigeria instead. So, and actually Euroclear, kudos to them, they just sponsored the first batch. So we are doing it next month in Makerere University, which is one of the largest in Africa. It's in Kampala, Uganda. So we are starting the selection processes in a couple of weeks, and we are announcing the cohort officially at the Inclusive FinTech Forum in Kigali.
Speaking of all that, and to interrupt you in the middle and kind of to be in context, happy to Time Pledge any kind of help in terms of human debt and the things they need to learn about organizations. So if you need me to do a module on that, happy to do it.
You're always have been, but you're in my radar for this, because there will be a bunch of seminars in parallel to the course. And also, statistically speaking, we think that every batch of students, 10 to 15% will actually become entrepreneurs. So they will not only go and work for companies. So this is actually the way I am planning to make a Time Pledge self-sustainable, is that the idea is that we are going to seed fund some of these, find a way to seed fund some of these entrepreneurs and the ideas that are going to build, especially because I personally love frontiers market. So if you could see the map, closer, you would see that there are 54 countries in Africa. Of course, we are focusing on sub-Saharan Africa for obvious reasons. And if you take countries like, Botswana, Senegal, Mali, DRC, we're talking about, countries between 10 and 100 million people with very basic fintech innovation, if any, right? So, of course, if the first one who set up a successful digital bank in DRC, yes, they have 100 million clients potentially, right? And with 80% of the population unbanked. So unbanked, I mean, not outside of the financial system, because, today, if you have a mobile wallet, you're in, but you don't have a bank account, right? So the moment that the regulators get,
more serious
more
about
agile, exactly, you see the potential, right?
Yeah.
So, and what happened, remember I told you that time that FinTech stage changed 3 times. So from FinTech stage, it became FTS Group. So FTS Group basically became much bigger than only an event company, because we started doing corporate innovation program, research, consulting, and etc. And then Elevandi, so the organizers of the Singapore FinTech Festival, and basically a spin-off of the Monetary Authority of Singapore, they decided that we would be a good partner to organize their African events. So now, the FTS Group merged or morphed into the evolution of Elevandi, called GFTN, Global Financial Technology Network. And so I changed the name of the company again into Time Pledge Ltd. So now Time Pledge is a UK company that has exclusively an impact and a network effect focus. And so that's more or less. Well, maybe I would add that 6 years later, that story of InnoTribe and how none of the InnoTribe founders works for Swift anymore, and we are all doing very different but all super exciting jobs, ended up in a book that is called Talent and Rebels, where basically I try to figure out how can a corporate misfit survive in a world where understanding entrepreneurship and lateral thinking is not that immediate. So
I'm glad you mentioned it.
forgot.
I'm glad you mentioned it, because I get it quoted many times when I meet bank executives that talk about emotional banking. They're telling me that the only 2 books that existed in the last 15 years that talk about what fintech really was as an actual movement is mine and yours, because everything else is just a theory about banking.
True. I couldn't speak about banking because that's not, really, really, really not my background. But, and of course, we forgot Breaking Banks, which is, the European version of the Breaking Banks. And, very proud of Breaking Banks Europe, 5 years, close to 300 shows. And this year we changed it because it became a monthly show instead of a weekly show, because I wanted to do a monthly Breaking Banks Africa by giving visibility, to all these amazing, not only entrepreneurs, but ecosystems and stories, of the continent. So yeah, it's I need to find a better way or a more structured way to the question, what do you do today? If when I do it, when I'm in a keynote or in a presentation, I usually show a pair of angel wings. And I say that I like to give wings to entrepreneurs, and that like my one-liner. Then, of course, it translates in a gazillion of different activities, as you can see. But probably giving wings to entrepreneurs, with
It's where the
money,
heart is at.
knowledge, coaching, etc. is This I think that in 2024 I was the official coach of 6 different startup programs, from Mastercard to EcoBank to Visa, and the common denominator is this. I just came back from Barbados for FinTech Islands, and when you see, these guys pitching on stage, winning or not winning, but like making connection, and you see that they listen a little bit because the presentation they came with wasn't exactly the one that they displayed, and people often sort of overlook how important is the storytelling, right, of your own idea, of your own startup. I think that's probably my sweet spot if I had to pick one.
Right. I mean, where to start? What to grab from? Yeah, your journey is absolutely spectacular, and it's been through a number of meandering moments. But with that said, like you said, there's a very clear and obvious connecting line through everything, and it's very evident to anyone who's ever worked with you that you put a lot of heart and soul into actually applying yourself. I mean, we've all seen mentors and coaches over the years who are just kind of ticking a box. And I think in my experience, entrepreneurs always kind of react to when there's genuine heart in the advice. So I've been a Techstar and Startup Bootcamp and whatever mentor myself, Ignite now mentor for a while myself. But yeah, it's a good feeling at the same time that it kind of hopefully gives people shortcuts. I'm one of those immensely straightforward people who just go, right, I tell you something that no one else will tell you. And so it's not necessarily graded as the most pleasant of advice, but I'm sure that ideally people get something out of it. So now looking at, number one, you're the only authority that I know on the continent. So there's stuff to ask about how they're moving and what's happening over there. But secondly, I think more importantly, you've seen most of the recent startups of most of us, I would say, old guard of fintech mafia. So what's happening these days? What's new and hot and what's coming? It cannot still be blockchain. So what's the big thing?
So and I will try not to talk about AI because
Let's talk about AI
you
separately if you like. That's kind of your thoughts on AI are
yeah.
separate thing.
So my kind of thing today is the intersection between sustainability and finance, if you want to. So, for example, one of the things that is particularly relevant for the continent, but not only, is the number of climate tech, funds that have been popping up, and of course, by climate tech is it's the concept or the scope is much larger than climate alone, right? And it's not mainly B2B, of course. But it goes way beyond, the carbon footprint, the data, and it goes into, for example, like reinventing fundamentally, agriculture or mining, for example. So the interesting enough, in Barbados last week, there is this mining company that uses blockchain to disintermediate or reintermediate actually the last mile of the artisanal mining, right? And so there was another company 4 years ago I almost invested in, originally from Francophone Africa. Back then, I said, "Wow, that's a great idea, but it's a little bit too early." And in the meantime, these guys out of Barbados, they are in a fintech conference in Barbados, talking about a DRC, a DRC mine that is using their technology, and I say, wow. And then they say, why are we pitching here? Well, because in the 20 plus Caribbean countries, there are 75% of them that have natural mining as a resource. So they said, oh my God, how, technology can help financial inclusion. So this is, and so this is what, on one hand, is really overlooked by most of us because, it's usually fintech today makes rich people richer. That's or in the world that I touch every day, fintech is an opportunity to level up, the bottom billions, right? And now I don't really care if this is trendy or not, and to a certain extent, I'm also less interested to talk about it. But what I'm interested in is, how can we replicate the evolution of an inclusive ecosystem that starts with, payment rails and credit and value-added services and insurance and micro financial services, because in many countries people can't afford an insurance plan or the way we think about it. And how do we need to reinvent it in a way that you can include the next billion customers, So Google has, I discovered it because a good friend used to lead it. Google has a division called the next billion users. Okay. And super interesting. Unfortunately, that next billion is more focused on India and than on Africa, because there are one next billion user in India alone, for Google probably, or close to it. But it's interesting, how, Google, that we always talk about them as at the forefront of,
as ubiquitous,
the great culture, for a bunch of things. And I think that a lot more companies should have a next billion users division, and it's not the case today. So this is what I'm really passionate and what I see people not dedicating enough attention to.
Right. I like that. I really like that answer because, and it ties into, you wouldn't know this because it hasn't yet aired, but the first episode of this season had Andra Sonea on it. So we've talked about financial inclusion, studied at the PhD level, and what we both kind of landed on is that it's still, and we will continue to be, an area that's in need, and it's not as sexy as other areas. It's not derivatives and the acts, but it's there, and it's an actual need that needs sorting in terms of infrastructure everywhere. And I like that you connected it to, or rather that you started from the point of view of sustainability, because I think almost everything is climate tech these days, because unless we figure out how to fix that part, it doesn't really matter what we do on the other bit. But in terms of being sustainable, and I'll maybe bring you back to the AI conversation, there's a lot that needs rethinking and changing for many reasons. One, that we have a change of guards, of generations that's due to happen in our industries. Then, and that I say this on almost every episode, these kids coming in are a very different sort of human than what we have worked with before, and they have a lot more self-respect and boundaries and ideas about making the world a better place and so on. And we see them every day with the new entrepreneurs, and it's an amazing thing, but it's also going to clash seriously with a world in which even we were the avant-garde, and let's face it, we're the old guard now. But there's still a serious amount of boards that are an even older generation than that. So, that alone, that kind of generation push and pull in the financial technology world, I think it's going to come into play soon. And then when you combine that with the AI buzz of do we actually need humans, or can we make all the software magically by telling ChatGPT what to do? Then you have kind of a powder keg. And if you put that together with the actual climate challenges that we're going through and the needs in fintech, I just think it's going to be a very interesting space over the next couple of years. So how do you feel about this AI thing? And a more cheeky question, what is the delta between the chatbots that we were seeing every bank desperately trying to color in green and what they have today?
So I think that what is missing today is and you know, let's talk about something that happened in the past 48 hours, right? So you know, when you and we don't even know if you know, that Chinese platform that was built with a fraction of the cost of a ChatGPT is you know, I don't know if you noticed it, but in the Facebook wall in the past 48 hours, there is, hey, you know, look, you know, I asked ChatGPT about Matteo Rizzi, and then I asked about Deepsea, you know, the is that right? Deepsea,
I think
right?
Deepsea,
Yeah. And I said, oh, look, you know, or Deepsea don't know who is Mao Zedong because it's like too old and stuff like that. And so they are trying to, basically, they're trying to figure out whether or not is a massive hoax, or if there is, or if they really did something which is potentially, you know, at the same level of a $100 billion project. Or a $1 trillion project, and they could make it with 6 million, right? So the point is, I think that we are looking. There is not enough people who don't give a fuck in this world. In the sense that, and I can learn. I learned this, you know, at my young age, much closer to retirement than to the fullness of your professional life. When you actually can be bold, because the objective of what you want to do, your mission, is more important than you know, paying the bills and your own personal return. You end up actually being way more effective and powerful. Right? So, because it requires a lot of boldness to come in the world and say, listen, I built this, it cost 6 million, and I built it with 20 kick-ass Chinese students, when the other guy on the other side of the ocean claims to have done the same thing, but
with
1,000 times, 1,000 times more resources than the other one. You know, it's actually, when you think about it, he could have said, I did it for half the price, and still be super interesting for an investor, right? But no, he said, I've done it 1,000 times cheaper.
Right.
So, and you know, the fact that it's amazing how something that you have never heard become the most popular thing in 48 hours.
Yeah.
Right? So, and I think that the level of disruption this world needs is actually closer to this than anything that is inertia based. Doesn't matter how fast that inertia is, you see, and is getting very personal, because, you know, something that doesn't comply with any speed of inertia, but it goes, you know, like handing them with a more disruptive mode, has to be done by people who are selfless,
Right.
because people don't want to risk it. Why should you risk it? Why should I? Maybe they won't call me to speak anymore, or maybe they
Right.
will, they will not invite me there, or they won't call me in that, for that NED position, or they wouldn't think of me for the board. At the same time, true story. I got prompted to actually sit on a board of a very uh, listed multi-billion-dollar financial services company, and I did that interview with the headhunter that was recruiting that board member, right? And the prompt was that, they are looking for someone, with a very disruptive vision, like not afraid to to speak his, from his true
Right.
self. Someone who has experience with, innovation in financial services, who has seen a lot of different. I mean, even the guy was like, my name was written
Right.
on that CV all over the places. And they ended up giving that net position to a 25 years experienced banker, right? Now, and so clearly that person wasn't compatible with the CV they put out there, right? Yet, at the certain point in time in the recruitment process,
It
basically
became risky. Yeah.
fear took over. So, and we need more people that are not controlled by fear,
Right. Yeah.
and they are driven by the true willingness to change the world, right? Because everyone says is a little, and again, talking about, slides that we were showing up at almost 20 years ago, disruptive versus incremental innovation, right? So, uh, and that's why I talk about rebels and misfits, because I'm sorry, but these are the type of personalities
You're going to need
that
for any disruption. Otherwise, you can only
exactly,
settle for incremental,
exactly,
of course. Yeah.
and I'm afraid that there are not enough.
Not enough. Yeah, I know what you mean. And I like how you brought it back. And it's not necessarily the most hopeful of messages, but it's the truth, which is, to keep to the speaking plain English vein, having enough balls to create big change is difficult. Like you very well pointed out, in particular, the risk goes up the older you get, actually, which is one of the reasons why this new generation has a clearer runway than we do. But also, maybe this is I like to think of the hopeful idea that maybe this is a time where, humanity is changing towards having to be forced to look within and having to do better on their what used to be soft skills, because that's our only USP remaining looking forward. So I think that big piece of truth has to start landing, and when it does, I feel like it's going to propel authenticity. It's going to make people be a lot more themselves and honest and fearless, because being who you are and the brand being that of truthfulness and of fidelity to what you feel will become a lot more important. So I'm really optimistic about eventually things changing towards what matters, the courage, the creativity, the things that AI is not going to give anyone. So I'm optimistic in the long run. In the short run, it's going to be tight and scary for everybody, I think. But I really
Agree
love
with you.
kind of how much we have we have covered, but also, we're left with a lot, and I don't think we would need to do another one. But even in that one, we probably wouldn't get very far talking through all the stories that we've had together. But let me ask you one last thing, and it doesn't have to be the last thing, because again we have to chat some more. But for this episode, what do you think is how do I formulate this elegantly? What do you think is absolutely necessary? If you had to choose one thing that banking needs, or rather the industry needs, and that kind of applies to technology in general as well, what would be the one thing you'd be hopeful for in terms of either on the inside or the outside of the process? So I know we've just touched on it, but what would you say is critical over the next 10 years?
There are different ways in which I could answer the question. And if I have to pick one, I would probably say a much smarter, inclusive, and open way to manage talents. And which is not, of course, something which is peculiar to banks, but is actually true for the majority of the industries. And the reason why I'm saying this is not just because financial services players should hire different profiles of people that are not hiring today, but equally equally important, make sure how they nurture, develop, change the current workforce
The
they
value
are
they have.
working. And again, let's talk about if you are talking with financial services, whether there are startups, grown-ups, banks, insurances, central banks, and what is really sad, Duena, is that when you are really, really cold as a piece of ice, and you look at it without any prejudgment, there are 3% of people that make really, really things move forward in any given institution. What I mean is that there are very little visionaries, and most people are executors, right? So the amount of people you bring from the executors into the critical thinkers sort of skill set, the faster any company grows, right? And this in financial services, especially, where under the same umbrella you have payments, credits, value-added services, asset management, digital assets now. So you can't expect the same 2% of your workforce to
Be good at everything.
Exactly, and to be the engine that brings every single business forward. So your capacity of, and I'm taking digital assets is now a good example, right? So it is true that, especially with the type of political power in place right now, that it must be, it will be a pivotal moment for digital assets, regardless, right? So, and not just because the Bitcoin is over 100K, but also because it really seems, to get the attention of the more traditional financial services in general, right? Now, the largest Italian bank announced that they bought 10 Bitcoin 2 weeks ago. They made the headlines every single day since then. To having bought 10 Bitcoins as an institution, right?
Wow.
So, now, I happen to know well, the team or the different teams actually that are in different financial institutions looking at, the assets, and they are doing out of their own, let's say, intellectual inclination, right? But most of them, there are self-taught, right? Because there is no critical yet thinking, the strategic approach is more, I don't want to say it's improvised because it's not, but you see the difference between something that can
a lot more
become
empirical, of course.
can become a $3 trillion opportunity. Is a $3 trillion opportunity done, just because we happen to have someone that is passionate about it, and she's leading now a project inside that particular institution that will eventually lead into some sort of digital asset engagement. You see, you see it. So when you say that one thing is a strong is a strong advice to spend energy and focus and quality time in thinking, how am I adapting? How do I adapt my existing workforce? Not only because very often what does it happen is that you get people from outside, right? You pay them. It's like a fintech all over again. Sure, let's get the former entrepreneur, put him or put her in, as the head of fintech of my institution, and then it becomes a beautiful lipstick, on a, I don't even know if it's a beautiful pig, right? Because the that person alone, might bring 2 or 3, hackers from outside, but then it just become, a battle too big to fight, right? If you don't adapt your inside or first. So that would be my thing I would mention.
I love that. And that kind of absolutely matching with my experience trying to change cultures of various organizations. I strongly believe that that's the way. Doing more human work internally is emergency one. If everyone stopped, I kept saying this, stop doing any of the operational and technical work they have for the next few months and did nothing but try to catch up on collaboration and communication and working together and figuring out how they feel and knowing each other, then that would be time well spent. But it's not going to happen. But ideally, in a future world, we will have at least some time carved out to doing that. Because if we don't do conscious human work, we're not going to be holding on to this idea that we can have people effective in any of these industries. And you're very, very right. This is a common problem for everywhere. It's not a banking only problem, but this is where we should all focus from here on. Who do we have in the team? What does that team look like? And how courageous and willing are they to change the world? I really love that perspective. Thank you, Matteo. And thank you in general for spending time with us today. And hopefully we'll have you back so you tell us more. But yes, it's been amazing. Thank you.
Thank you, Duena. Always a pleasure. And I am sure that this conversation will continue online and offline.